In terms of like my own entrepreneurial ways right now, I feel
Hmm.
like I'm directly in that middle of that portion, like
Okay.
I'm working on a bunch of different things. A couple friends and I are trying to make a video game. We're trying to get like a
Ooh.
documentary produced.
Okay.
Uh, and then, I've started like a few of my other companies and really
Talk
like,
about it,
one.
Parker. Welcome to Fortune Podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Elijah. Today we have an amazing guest, and he's a business mogul in the making. Welcome, Parker Costin. Hey, Parker.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Of course. How are you?
I'm doing well. Yeah, good week so far. Startup basketball and hockey playoffs, can't complain.
It's one of the best for me. I'm a basketball
Hmm.
fan, so
Absolutely.
where where are you tuning in from?
Huntington Beach, California.
Amazing, amazing. So we're going to take it back to the very beginning. And I want to ask, what did you want to be growing up?
Oh man, what did I want to be growing up? I think, like most kids, I was obsessed with sports, so wanted to be
Mhm.
a professional hockey player. Hmm.
Awesome, awesome. And before we even get into that, I forgot to ask, how do we know each other for the people that's listening?
Oh yeah, of course. So Jess and I used to work together at
Mhm,
my first job outside of
mhm.
college at a marketing agency.
Yes. And it was nice to
Hmm.
connect with you. And I later found out that we went to the same college, obviously a little bit
Hmm.
of time apart, but we'll get into that. So I want to ask, like, where were you born and raised?
So I was actually born and raised in Huntington Beach, and then
Okay.
I moved up to LA for college. Was there for about 10 years afterwards,
Okay.
including college, and
Yes.
then moved back. To my parents' place. Had a few
Hmm.
little family health troubles, but moved back, and
Okay.
then set everything straight. Things are going well,
I
and
love
then
that.
been here, moved in with some good friends, some of my best
Yes.
friends from like elementary school, which is funny. So we kind of just like
Wow.
all had a fun, comeback together, which is great.
I love that you kept in touch and are still
Hmm.
close. What was your upbringing like? Because not many people can say they grew up in Huntington Beach. So how was that?
Yeah, no, it's super interesting. I always say that it's a good mix of classy and trashy. Like we have a bungalow down here now, which is funny, but like people might be trying to fight outside the bungalow. So a very interesting place to grow up for sure. A lot of beach days.
Hmm.
Mine was a little unique because I grew up playing ice hockey down here too, which is like
Okay.
pretty unique for like a beach town. But was a lot of fun. Yeah, a great place to grow up.
I love that. And did you have any siblings or how was that like for you?
Yeah, I have one older brother. He actually went to
Okay.
LMU as well, so good for
Yes.
us. And then
And
we
I
were
actually
able
had
to
a
play
class with
hockey
him.
together. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I forgot about
Yeah.
that. Yeah,
The only reason I
no.
remembered is because when I met you, I was like, Costin, I feel like that I've never really
Hmm.
actually heard anybody with that same last name. And I was like, I think I had a class with somebody named Hunter. And you're like, that's my brother. So
Yeah, I
that
totally
that was
forgot about
funny.
that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So same thing. LMU. That was a lot of fun. Played hockey up there with him, which was cool because that was like our first year being
Cool.
able to do it together. Because usually it's like you can only go 1 year either direction. He's like two and a half.
Okay. Okay. I
Mhm.
love that. And then with your mom and dad, like what did they do for work and stuff like that?
Yeah. So my dad was a consultant for Deloitte,
Okay.
and like worked on a bunch of the big projects like Direct TV and like SoCal Edison, like managed a lot of
Hmm.
those like massive 300 million, $500 million projects.
Yes.
And then my mom is a ceramic artist.
I
So
love that.
directly down the middle of type A and type B personalities, was a fun but interesting experience growing up for sure.
I love that. That's a good mix of strategic and
Hmm.
creative for sure.
Yeah.
So, kind of taking it to college, because I know you wanted to be an ice hockey player. So then you went to college at LMU. Can you tell me like what was your major and how did you decide that?
Yeah. So major marketing, and
Hmm.
then minor in economics.
Okay.
And wanted to decide. I decided to do that. Well, first of all, I had given up on the hockey dream way before that.
Okay.
So don't. That's not why I went to LMU at all. I went there because it's a great school.
Yeah.
And then I also could play hockey while I was there, and be with my brother and all those things. Um, the reason that I chose those is because, like you, I think that
Hmm.
marketing is like one of the most unique portions of like within the business world. It's directly in the middle of like
Yes.
psychology and
Yeah.
business, and feel like I have a good sense of like how to test and learn and things like that. So definitely felt like that was a good move. And then, of course, like economics, even though it brought down
Right.
my grade point average because those are super hard at LMU,
Yes.
like still did well, don't worry. But that those are definitely the harder ones,
Right.
and feel like they've helped me a lot now that I've kind of moved a bit into the finance space.
Right. And did your dad have any impact on you doing economics at all? I know he was in finance with Deloitte.
Yeah, not really. I
Okay.
mean, yeah, I think he just like maybe a little bit. Like I've always been
Okay.
interested in like his work and things like that, but
Okay.
he definitely, impacted me to want to be a businessman for sure.
I love that. So, fast forward to today. I know, let's see,
Hmm.
you're the chief services officer at Tokeniz, and you're the founder of your own venture firm, among many other things. So, I was
Hmm.
wondering if you could walk me through your career progress from graduation to where you are now.
Yeah, definitely. So in college, I had a bunch of internships. I think I had around like five or six,
Yes.
kind of like all across the board. One of them was at a media agency, not MediaCom, it was at Mindshare. And
Yeah.
that's the reason that I ended up working at MediaCom with you.
Mm-hmm.
And so started there, started on the Pokemon account,
Mm-hmm.
doing like digital activations and things like that. Moved
Mm-hmm.
over to paid social with Jake, and
Yes.
then worked on PlayStation software and a few other accounts as well. Moved up that way.
Mm-hmm.
Moved to a gaming startup where I did
Okay.
user acquisition, which
Cool.
was really cool. So like working through basically every type of like ad network and then everything like that. Building the physical ads with one of my business partners now, who was the creative director there. And then moved from there to Square, where I ran their North American products. So like that was kind of the finance jump. Yeah, it was great.
Mm-hmm.
Only was there for like 3 or 4 months because I was headhunted by someone at Start Engine, which
Okay.
essentially is like a venture capital firm, but like equity
Okay.
crowdfunding style. So it's
Okay.
essentially like a Kickstarter of venture capital is a good way to think about
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
Worked there for 2 years, moved up to VP there, and
Mm-hmm.
then decided to take the leap to work on my own consulting and then like things like that. Uh, Eventually worked over to Tokenize, where now I'm the chief
Okay.
services officer, which
Okay.
is essentially like a subset niche of like equity crowdfunding itself. So
I
you
love
invest in
that.
companies in the same way, and then you get like digital currency tokens compared to
Mhm.
equity. It's still the same exact thing. It's just like a different term for it. And it gives you the
Mhm.
ability to like buy, sell, and trade them farther along in the future versus equity
Okay.
crowdfunding, where you kind of have to hold on to them until they go public or get sold.
Right, right. And how do you like the investment space? Because I know that it had to be an interest of yours. I remember, like, I think back in the day, what was that, 2018, you were already talking about starting some investments of your own. So,
Hmm.
how did that like progress? And how do you like the space where you're at now? Because I know it's a little bit different from just marketing and what you were doing with media. So, I'd love to
Hmm.
know how you were faring here.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. So I really like it. Most of my work is really on working with founders and CEOs to
Okay.
help them like build packages to make investments attractive to other investors. So like I'm not
Hmm.
necessarily investing in them, but it's really fun just to work with a bunch of crazy founders that have put their entire life's work into something like that, into things that
Yeah.
I could never even imagine.
Wow.
Like for example, I was working with a company that owns the patent for like long range uh, long range energy transfer through radio waves. So essentially, like
Really?
you could within your home, you don't need to like plug into the wall anymore. You put like a
Mhm.
receiver, and then it's like Wi-Fi, and it's just power
Wow.
running through your home and things like that. Worked with a few others that are just like biotech, like and things like
Mhm.
that. One of them, Fisher Wallace, essentially like has over 20,000 prescriptions that people can
Wow.
utilize for it in the UK. And it's like this headband that you put on to get rid of PTSD and have better sleep and things like that. So kind of like
Wow.
across the board, a bunch of different companies that are absolutely crazy. It's just like, first of all, how did you think of this? Second of all, how did you dedicate your whole life to this?
Right.
So so I find that to be the most invigorating.
I
Obviously it
love
comes
that.
with some challenges because you're like
Mhm.
right in the middle of these these precipices of their career and their life,
Got
and
it.
you're right in the middle of that and their money. So sometimes they get a little
Mhm.
angry, but other
Of
than that,
course.
yeah. But most of them are reasonable and most of them are really nice.
I like that. And do you have to like kind of like bridge the knowledge gap of like whatever their product is, or
Yeah.
do you actually have to know like, or do you not have to know stuff about what they're I'm trying to see the best way to ask it because you have
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
many different people coming in. So how do you approach that? Because those are vastly different
Yeah.
types.
No, 100%. Like trying to educate the client on how to do their marketing and like what marketing is and other things like that
Hmm.
is half of it, right?
Okay.
Like they might be a CTO that's like, developed a platform and it's like, all right, they have no idea how to, boil this down. And that marketing isn't just like a button that you turn on, right? Like that's the
Right.
main thing. Most people are like, why don't we just turn up spend? And it's like, that doesn't, all right, there's so much wrong with that I can't even, like, where do I start? But yeah, there's a lot of that boiling down kind of what marketing is to them, like how we can turn it on in the right way, smart, test and learn, like ROAS and things like that they just expect that it should be amazing and stuff. So it's like kind of taking them through that journey. And then the opposite side of like, okay, you're way too in the weeds. How do we break this down for other people that want to potentially invest in it? Right.
Got it.
It's like, and a lot of that comes with like, how we develop the creatives, what are the best value
Hmm.
propositions to get that point across, and all those things.
I like that. And then just last question for clarity, because I find this so
Mm-hmm.
fascinating. So then would you or your company be the spokesperson for that, or would their company be the one promoting their product? Because I know like when you're so in the grains, like you know every single detail, sometimes you could lose the customer or lose the
Yeah.
investor. So do they come to you to do that, or how does that work?
Yes. So essentially, we are helping them, like, get in front of the investors. So, like, we work
Okay.
with a bunch of different investor groups as well, like, whether or not it's like cold calling companies and things like that. We also, like, I will manage a lot of the Facebook spend and Google spend and other things like that. So, we have to
Right.
develop all the creatives that come with that.
Hmm.
So, we're working directly with the founders to help them get in front of investors in the best way and then kind of iterating and optimizing off of there.
I love that so much. And from what I've
Mhm.
seen, you've grown in your career so, so much. Just so many different jobs. I was looking at your LinkedIn and your resume. I'm like, whoo, this is long. So, a quick question before we get into like
Hmm.
a little bit more in depth. Did you have a
Yeah.
mentor?
A mentor. So
Hmm.
I've kind of like jumped around. Like I haven't had a consistent mentor all the way
Okay.
through, but I feel like within a few of my jobs, like I've had, a really good mentor along the way. When
Okay.
we were at MediaCom together,
Hmm.
like Jake was a great mentor.
Right.
Um,
Right.
he definitely, head of the social department and all those things, like had
Hmm.
to like
Hmm.
put his word in for me to be able to move over and actually listen to me,
Right.
to be able to be like, all right, I'm going to leave unless I'm on this paid social team. And he's like, okay, well, I guess, and then kind of like took me through that journey.
Right.
From there, a lot of it has come from, just like meeting people at the right strategic point in
Mm.
time, and things
Okay.
like that. I'm a big believer in like, being on your grind and working really
Hmm.
hard, and then someone will see you in that like 1 week time frame where they have met you, and then they're like, okay, this person is clearly like on their way, and then they just like
Correct.
have those organic conversations, and then bring you along or like think about you kind of the next time that they need something. And I've seen that, work very well within my career, just kind of like serendipity, working hard, making sure that you're kind of like on your grind at the right time, because you never know when that
Right.
person's going to show up.
It's so true, and I can advocate for that. Like you're such a hard worker with a great attitude, so I'm sure people love to have you on their team. And like for
Thank you.
people
Thank you.
that's of course. For people that's listening, how do you navigate kind of like advocating for yourself and then like seeking promotions, or is it more of like, oh, you just go to another company when it's not serving you? Like when do you know when's the right time?
Yeah, I mean, that's tough, right? Especially in our careers, it's much different. That's why talking to my dad has been tough about those types of things, because he's just like
Yeah,
stayed at the same company for a long period of times and things like
of
that. I think
course.
the older generation doesn't necessarily understand it.
Yeah.
Um, but within ours, I have found that like I consistently ask, and I don't think that it's necessarily like, oh, he's being annoying or other things, because it's just you're trying to actually progress your career. So what I do and what I've found that works really well is just consistently ask for the list of things that you need to do to let them see you get to that next level. Check off
Okay.
those boxes along the way. And then when they're done, just consistently ask, and then you could really have a much better understanding of whether or not the timeline is there, whether or not they actually have the role for you, kind of all those things in front of you. And then, you just check off all those boxes and then you get that promotion. And then guess what? 2 weeks, month later, when you're feeling good within that role again, you're like, all right, I need another list, right? And it's just like kind of a thing that you rinse and repeat. Like people might find it a little annoying, but it's about your career. And it's like, oh, he's passionate and he's trying to move up, so it's just like, all right, I've done all the things. Like, how can we move forward? And then when you see that that path isn't there, like within marketing, like a lot of the times when you're moving from like a senior associate role to a manager role or something like that, most of the time those aren't there within the timeline of like go-getters to be able to get them, like a year and a half. So you do most likely need to jump in that area, and then you'll probably swing back around and come back and other things like that. But that's what I've found, kind of like for especially the lower level ones, like trying to make sure you get that promotion every year and a half. And if you can't, then jumping ship.
I like that. And I think that's a great advice to people young in their career and people listening, because I know some people could just be like, okay, let me just be here, work super hard, and hopefully, fingers crossed, they'll see you. But I like that you had a plan. You asked them for what you needed from them and then consistently checked it off. And then if the growth is not there within the window that you need, then you can jump.
Yeah, exactly.
I like
and
that.
Like most people, and most people understand that. They'll see that along the way. And what's funny is that like in the beginning, they're like, oh, real go-getter. This is great. And then by the time you check all those things off, they're like, oh, crap. Like I am going to need to like fulfill my side of it. You could really see that come through if you have like a good relationship with your manager. Sometimes they'll just be like, look, it's not going to be there for 6 months. You're like, that's fair. And then you start to go figure out your everything outside of it. I've always been a big advocate of like trying to fix things at home at the exact same time as you're trying to go find out like where that next spot would be. Because worst case scenario, you got your promotion at home if you don't find the one that, you were looking for outside.
Right. And I like that you have a good balance of loyalty to the company, but also loyalty to yourself. Like you never lose sight of yourself, because sometimes, with marketing, you could be working so hard on a campaign or whatever it may be that you're like, okay, I stayed here for like 12 hours. Yes. Checking it off. And some people can get so lost in that they forget about their own career. So I like that you've always been like career minded. How did you just know to be like that? Is it like mentors, or you just already knew like, look, I don't want to waste any time?
I think that's just kind of how I'm wired. Especially like early on, it was like relatively easier just because like like what you need to handle as an employee is just like much more straightforward, right? It's like you need to get all your things out, make no mistakes, and like get these processes done, make sure that you could potentially get client facing and things like that. But like asking for those opportunities to know that you need to be there and kind of like all those things that come with it. Now it's like much harder, right? Like trying to move up from like a director to a senior director role, like that approach like will work, but it will be like more like 2 years, and things like that. But like early on, it's just more that like trying to get past the like I'm too young for this mentality and things like that. Cause like, it's one of those where that you're probably good enough to like be able to handle those things, or you see your manager and you're like, I could do that. But nobody's going to give me that opportunity at 23 and other things like that. It's like, just put that out of your mind and just try to be a go-getter and ask people if they need help. That was another thing that I did well early on. It's like, if I finished my work, I'd go around the room and I'd be like, do you need help? Does anyone need help? Before you go leave. And you just do that every day. And everyone's like, all right, he's a big team player. He's a hand raiser. Like he left because he didn't have work to do for him and kind of all those things. Like, that if people are thinking about a promotion and you don't come up immediately, then like that's kind of like on you in my mind.
Got it. No, it's totally true. But I think this is helpful because then people can know what they need to do. I think sometimes people go without like a map or kind of like a rubric of how to like grade themselves and to see if they're on track. And you made it a good point to keep yourself in their minds. Like it wasn't just like, oh, Parker is such a good worker. You asked, you bothered them, for lack of better words.
And that's the thing. Most people, and most like managers, like they don't want to do that, because if they put that clear path in front of you when they don't have it, like to be able to hand to you by the end of it, like then it's like, how do I keep you in this role?
Right.
So like they're not going to try to do that early on, but in the beginning they'll be like, stoked that you are such a hard worker. And like, they're like, this is awesome. Like, I've never had a go-getter like this. And then by the time like a
Right.
year comes up, they're like, oh
Like
no,
hiding from
like,
you.
yeah, they're like, which is like, a good problem to have, where it's just like, if you have them speechless in that, then that's an answer in itself, right? It's like, okay, well, they're not going to have the role available.
Right.
I should start looking elsewhere. But they know that like, I'm not going to sit around and wait for the role to show up. So they need to start having tougher conversations upwards. You need to have people talking for you and fighting for you and things like that.
I love this so much because this is stuff I wish I knew sooner. With that, how did you know, like, or what was your kind of like approach to choosing the next company? Because progressively you would get better and better and better and better. So did that factor in at all? Like, if I am going to leave said company, I want to make sure it's like a company of like a higher caliber. What was your approach to that?
Yeah, no, I mean, like, there's the combination of a few things, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I always, like I said, always try to fix the situation at home, right? So
Right.
like, always trying to do that at the exact same time, because that, perfect job that you're looking for might not exist out there, right?
It's
And you don't
true.
want to just like throw in the towel and like then be then
Yeah,
not be
like
like on the path for promotion, right? Like,
it's
because a lot of
true.
people just get comfortable and like relax and other things. That's normal. That's life, right?
Right.
Uh, but mine has been, at least early on, has been focused around
Hmm.
trying to like build my skill set more than anything
Okay.
else.
Got
So
it.
I worked on Pokemon doing like, assistant media planning. So like
Right.
obviously like much more simple things, buys
Hmm.
and working with vendors and then other things. I moved
Hmm.
over to paid social because like I think specializing is super important. Like if
True.
there's other things that can kind of like be taken over in the future by technology, it'll probably be like, types of like normal digital media buying and things like that.
Of course.
Uh, Moved over to paid social in that way to specialize, and then moved
Hmm.
to user acquisition, because I was able to not just do Facebook, but also do, Twitter, Google, YouTube, like everything. And then like a bunch of ad networks. Uh, and then like obviously also working within lifetime customer value, and you get to see the internal app and like all of those things within there. And then trying to get validated was my next step, was like working for like a higher end company, kind of like a Square, that's like on the same level of like a Google, Facebook, basically, to have something on your resume for them to be like, okay, like if you would be hired by this company or hired by that, like he's good enough for us, right? That kind of like validation one. The people do that all the time when you look at like recruiters and things, like that's like their main thing. So did that, and then that
Hmm.
was the best job I ever had for only 4 months, and just got like snatched up super quickly. One of my like one of the guys I play hockey with, that's like
Yeah.
40 years old or so, used to be the
Yeah.
head of Snapchat, and like he like recommended me for the job because his friend was the recruiter. And then I was like, went from being a manager to a director in like 4 months, like, and I was like, oh, okay, this was pretty quick. And then
I
moved
love
up from
that.
there to be the VP. I ran two full departments. I had 17 people underneath me at our height. Uh, and so that was kind of that moment of like I was saying, working upwards to try to make it so you get an opportunity that like you don't necessarily think that like people would give you, but you would thrive within it once you're there, right? Uh,
Yes.
uh-huh.
So I like how like opportunity met your preparation, and it was through like a pal that you met at hockey. Like I think that's so
Mm-hmm.
cool when you can have just hobbies that you just do because you enjoy it, and then opportunities come from that. But because you had been so diligent in your career path, you were ready for that. And I kind of want to go back to like you
Yeah.
going from a manager to a director at that level, managing 17 people, and then I think you also became a VP of a startup valued over like 1 billion.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
That's
That's a
Start
big
Engine. Yeah.
deal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, that's
It
so
was pretty crazy.
how yeah, like I'm kind of curious to like what experience do you believe prepared you for that, or did you kind of just go in and be like, okay, I'm just gonna try and manage this the best that I can. It's a huge jump, or did you just feel prepared, like, oh, I got this?
So the director one felt like a bigger jump than the VP one,
Okay,
just because like
okay,
internal promotions, I think, are a little easier, and like
right.
one of those in general, when you get those internal promotions, you're usually doing the job for 6 months before you like take over the role.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the jump from Square to Start Engine from manager to director was pretty big and pretty quick.
Right.
I had not managed a full team before, and then went into managing like 5 people, like right off the bat.
Right. Right.
And then one of my people actually quit on my first day. So I was like,
Oh,
okay,
no.
you should probably talk to the VP about this, because I don't know any of the paperwork for someone that's
Wow.
quitting on this day. So it was a very interesting, first start. Also, when I showed up, one of the bosses was like, oh, the team might not be super stoked because you're replacing a guy that we just let go on Friday. And I was like, oh, that's some
Oh, got
important
it.
information.
Right.
But went in, did really well.
Okay.
That was when we were able to manage our internal, basically we had a team that had our own salespeople. So we were almost like our own Start Engine, within there, like our own pod, our
Okay.
own team. So
Okay.
we'd have salespeople that would go out and find the startups and CEOs to potential to come and work with us. We would help them get on the platform, and then we take them through the entire process and all that. So we were just this one small niche team that we were working together, and
I
that was
like that.
really fun. I was able to build my own processes. Obviously, they went well because I eventually got promoted.
Yes. Yes.
And then just kind of took those, grew. It was the crazier part about the whole thing was that I think everyone on my team was younger than me as well. Within both
Really?
departments. Yeah.
Wow. I
So
thought
we
you
were a
would be the
really
older
young
one.
team.
Okay, got it.
No,
Or
that's
the
what I meant.
youngest one.
We were,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what was crazy about it. Working through with a bunch of other scrappy marketing individuals and, and creative teams, because I managed the
Okay.
creative team as well.
Wow.
And then just trying to find, a lot of that. I've learned a bunch about, how to manage people and things like that. But the main thing is as a manager, my main role is to break down the barriers to make it so you can do your job better. So if we're not talking about that, that's the main focus is how, after we have our conversations, who can I go and knock on some doors to find out, how do we fix this? There's a problem or things like that, making sure that people feel heard in those ways. And then also understanding that this isn't everyone's final destination and final goal. A lot of companies try to bring you in and then they're like, that's amazing. Other things you're stuck for life, and they just think that. I tried to frame it as it's a hyper growth startup, so people are going to leave, but let's try to not forget about how to build your career within this. Let's make it so you can get some bullet points on those resumes, some things that you can talk about when you're in interviews for that next role, that next thing that you're working for. So really just how do we build you as an employee and as a person? And then, just take it from here as well. It's not just all based on what you perform for me. I want you to understand just that this is also super important for you. How do we get you to do the things that you want to do, that you want to round yourself out around? Because otherwise I'm just going to be giving you your daily tasks. And it's just going to be okay, where's the passion? How do we take this? How do we move on?
I definitely like how you are as a manager, at least how you're explaining yourself as a manager, and your leadership style. And would you say that helps morale? Because I know there's some companies where people work with managers and they hate their job, they hate their manager, and they want to leave. Maybe not because they don't like the company, but their direct manager isn't being there. So have you found that has helped people to want to stay because it feels like you also have their best interest?
Yes. No,
Okay.
most definitely. It helps so much just to have that point of clarity, because it's also
Right.
I don't need you to want to stay forever. You're a
Right.
person, we're people here. If you want to leave, or if you see a future where you're going to leave or other things, just have that conversation in terms of okay, I would need to get promoted to this, or I want to learn more about this. Most of my job has become bulk this, other things like
Right.
that. It's all right, well, there might be another spot for you in the organization. We're very lean,
Mm-hmm.
so we could
Mm-hmm.
potentially pivot, have you somewhere
Mm-hmm.
else. On top
Mm-hmm.
of that, I need to know what drives you. So we
Right.
have a bunch of different people at your position too. You
Mm-hmm.
don't have to do that project, right?
Got it.
You could do this one because that's your niche. That's what you backed into. That's what you're trying to learn about.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you see yourself going in the future. I might have someone else that loves data analysis, that
Right.
would be better for this project and things like that. So I think
I like
having
that.
that candor and having that kind of ability to have those conversations is super
Mm-hmm.
important.
And just like a hypothetical, because at least, it's easier when there's maybe multiple people at the same position where it's like, okay, no
Hmm.
worries. We can like see how we can switch you to this position. But have you ever been in a position where it's like, okay, maybe the team is actually quite like lean. There's not enough people to like kind of like, put in different positions and you kind of need
Hmm.
them there because they're doing a good job. Like what would be your approach either in real life or hypothetically to that?
Yeah, no, I mean, that has definitely happened.
Okay.
So a lot of that would be, well, if it's like project based and they don't like the project, sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it also will be like, look, you've already started this one, like just
Yeah.
kind of tough this one out. And then I'll keep that in
Yeah.
mind and what's more passionate and then try to spin the conversation of like,
Mm-hmm.
what else would you want instead? Like you're
Right.
going to finish this one. Sometimes it's good to do things outside your comfort zone, blah, blah, blah. But like, where should I put you in the future?
Right.
For projects that could go to anyone on the team. And then in
Mm-hmm.
terms of like ones of like when the promotions and things would happen, I've
Mm-hmm.
been trying to be as straightforward with that as possible too,
Okay,
because
that's
like
good.
that's how you develop the candor. Otherwise, if
Right.
you like hold back certain information, then like how does any of the relationship kind of develop if you hold back the most important stuff?
Right.
So it would be the same thing. It would be like, look, okay, I can see that you've been wanting to move up. I've been seeing that like you
Mm-hmm.
think that you're ready for that. Let's build
Mm-hmm.
that list. So I'll do it the
Okay.
opposite way and be like, look, you haven't checked off these boxes. You actually made like two major mistakes within the last two
Okay.
months,
Right.
things like that. And just like be straight up with them kind of in both sides. But it's like, I definitely think you could get there. You would be at the top of
Mm-hmm.
my list. Right now, you're even competing with her, or something like
Okay.
that. And it's like, I'll be
Yeah.
straight up. Like, it's
I
just
like
like,
that
that's,
honesty.
yeah. I think that
Yeah.
everyone needs to know kind of like where they lie. It's like, all right, well,
Right.
she's crushing it right now. She just had one of our biggest raises. Like, I think naturally I would turn to her first. I could see
Right.
myself going to you, but like, what do we do to build that? What do we do to build your
Right.
case? So like, I do the same thing where I'm like, I need to have those conversations above me. Like, what's your case? How do we build it? How do we make it the best? And then if I have that one like go getter that won't put it away or won't stop, it's like, all right, well, then if we go to have those conversations and like you're not the main person that we're talking about, if there's like
Right.
any doubt, then like we messed up. So like how do we make
Right.
sure that you're just the main person that we're talking about and things like that.
Wow. Okay. Manager of the year
Thank you,
award,
thank you.
because I think trust and like that, like honesty and being candid is so helpful, and it helps people to also trust you as a manager to want to work their
Hmm.
best for you. I think sometimes people encounter managers where they're like, "Oh yeah, just hold on." 3 months goes by and then they don't keep their word, and then it kind of like depletes their trust and
Yeah.
depletes their morale. So I like that you've kind of taken like the best parts of like previous managers and maybe what you wish you had and just
Hmm.
became that person. And look, it's working out. So hopefully that can encourage other managers.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. No, I
So
definitely agree.
yes.
Sorry,
So
go
kind
ahead.
of taking no, 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 of course. I just kind of want to also kind of touch on the internships part because I know that you
Hmm.
had so many internships. I'm gonna read off a few of them
Okay.
because like most of them like occurred like I don't maybe during college.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I'll read them through and then go from there. So you were marketing and
Okay.
sales intern in Culver City.
Hmm.
You did music
Yep.
artist management and digital marketing
Hmm.
for a management company that managed artists. You were development intern at Power Pictures, digital
Hmm.
media planning intern at Mindshare, which I know that's
Hmm.
probably how you got into MediaCom, and
Yep.
franchise marketing intern at Sony.
Yep.
So, what would you say is the importance of internship? Because clearly you have a lot of them and at amazing like companies. And I know sometimes at school, people are like, oh, let me just graduate early or let me just finish. But it seems like you made it a priority to take on these internships. So, like, what role do you think they played in helping your career?
Yeah, no, I mean, definitely. I think the biggest aspect of internships is getting you that first role,
Mm,
and then like what you were talking about, showing people that like going to college wasn't just like a thing that you did, like you really
right.
want to like be sure to be ready for the workforce. Like
Mm-hmm.
college, I think that college is great and it's more of like learning how to learn, like
Right.
it's like they showed up and they understood these complex concepts very, very quickly. And like, I think
Mm-hmm.
they could do that at my job. But like, do they have the actual work experience? Have they worked anywhere? Because it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
actually work like that, kind of like in the actual workforce.
Right.
So my main thing when I had Mindshare as like my internship. That is the like only reason that I got a job right out of college. I went on maybe
Right.
40 interviews,
Wow.
didn't get a single offer, and then
Wow.
the only one that I did was from Mindshare or from MediaCom. So and that was
Wow.
clearly because I had that in my
Right.
back pocket. And I didn't necessarily know, like, I've had some great internships, like Sony Pictures
Hmm.
Television is pretty big. Bill Silva Management, like, runs the Hollywood Bowl shows. So I was able to work there. So, like, big companies. But just like, it was really tough out there during that time period, I think, as well. Like, I saw a bunch of articles about it, didn't realize how bad it was until I entered the workforce. But yeah, I would not have gotten my first role, and my entire career path would have been much, much different. Probably not have started in an agency if I didn't have that internship.
Right. And obviously MediaCom is a fantastic place to start because that
Yeah,
like kind
it
of
was great.
puts like, yeah, it puts like kind of like in any recruiter or any like hiring manager's mind, like, oh, okay, let's see what he's
Hmm.
working with. And then like you were diligent, you did everything you had to do, find mentorship through Jake and such. So I think like
Hmm.
you really lucked, like that was like a
Yeah,
goaded
it
way
was
to start
great.
out your career.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's the serendipitous thing, right? Like, I never
Right.
really thought, like, when I got that internship too, it was just kind of like out of nowhere. Like, I applied to a bunch and then just like, oh, cool, had like a call, and then the guy loved me. And then it was like, all right, great. Like, that's cool. Didn't have a single in person interview, and then showed up and then had a great summer doing it. And then same thing, like, just like, didn't think that would be, I thought that Sony Pictures Television would be definitely the one that got me the job. And then just
Yeah.
like, went through my month and a half of misery, and then ended up, having a great job, meeting you, having a great career.
Yes, I love this. And quick question, because you had a lot of entertainment internships. Were you thinking about
Hmm.
going into entertainment?
Yeah, I
Okay.
was. Being so close. I mean, you went to LMU
Yeah.
too, right? So
Yeah.
it's just like
Film
hard
school.
to, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So there you go, even more so.
Yeah.
Like, so really hard to like break away from thinking, and it's obviously like a lot of fun things to do, and
Right.
very interesting. I started a club at LMU as well because I didn't get into the M school, and I was like, I'm gonna do something to talk about in interviews and change the perception and other things like that. And so I started the LMU Entertainment Industry Connection Network, where I'd have people
Ah.
come in and meet and talk, just like, basically we had a bunch of, I think we had like 6 meetings where people from a few of my other classes that were like guest
Hmm.
speakers would come in and talk, just like, meet people, explain their career path,
Right.
and like how you get into entertainment and all those things.
A young boss in the making already. I love that.
Thank you.
I
Thank you.
And I think you fulfilled a niche that like was clearly needed because that's something that I found and a lot of like the people I went to school with found. So like I was
Yeah.
in film and political science, so I did like a dual degree type situation. But a lot of people found that like there was no like direct placements into like jobs or
Yeah.
industry, and LMU was expensive, Parker. Like
Yeah. And it's
it's such
right
an
there.
right, it's all there.
Yeah.
So it's like you would think that there would be better connections, especially for how long they've been around. So I like that you started that. And hopefully, even through this podcast, people can get like, ooh, I'm in school. Let me get an internship ASAP because
Hmm.
a lot of people go
Hmm.
through that post grad depression. Like you had 1.5 months of like misery, but then some people could be like a year, like 2 years,
Yeah.
and even more now. So I love all that you just said.
Thank you. Thank you.
One of the things that you said is you said that you're going to fail 20 times before you make it big. So has there ever been a point where you've thought like, I'm kind of like failing? Because I know you mentioned like diversifying like, your skills and stuff like
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
So like, has there ever been a point where you thought like, I don't feel like I'm killing it in this area? Or have you ever experienced that sense of failure, and how did you bounce back if so?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of like my own entrepreneurial ways right now, I feel
Hmm.
like I'm directly in that middle of that portion, like
Okay.
I'm working on a bunch of different things. Like a couple friends and I are trying to make a video game. We're trying to get like a
Ooh,
documentary produced.
okay.
Uh, and then, I've started like a few of my other companies, and really
Talk
like,
about it,
one,
Parker. Plug yourself in
but
because you're like founder and co-founder of so many different, like, including your own venture.
yeah, yeah. Well, like, I don't know. I started like it's an interesting one, but I'm not a huge TikTok guy. But I started like a
Okay.
TikTok, and like we have like 30,000 followers. and
Okay.
like trying to like build that up to be kind of like a travel influencer thing. Essentially trying to like liaison that into almost like an Airbnb or like something like that, where
I love that.
people that are like-minded, individuals that like want to, they're entrepreneurial and want to make sure that when they travel, they have good Wi-Fi, they have a place to work and other things like that. And kind of like building that into the society, working into like the actual city, and like trying to like make connections of like, oh, if you go to dinner here, like other things, mention our name, and then just kind of like build, like vertically integrate into like things and places that I love.
Okay.
And then trying to like build that up. That's one of them. Uh, and so like things like that. But like right
Right.
now, to bring it all back, they are tough. Like
Mm.
things don't like start off immediately and always go great right off the bat. But I feel that like, once you do hit like one of those things, right? You fail 90% of the time right off the bat early. You get one and then your percentage switch. Like then you're succeeding 90% of the time. And like then everything else works. It's kind of like an avalanche because it's like, oh, it's this guy that's working on that. He made this validated. Like, you already have a platform, you already have those things. So I'm just like working on building those things up right now. Kind of like outside of normal career stuff. It's like, this is like the entrepreneurial, like, things with my name on the side of them and stuff like that.
I like that. So, would you say that your balanced, I mean, your approach to kind of like continuing on and not getting discouraged when you do face that 90%, is it like analytical? Like, okay, I know that for sure 90% of the time I already expect to fail. So it makes it easier. Or do you rely on some of your friends and business partners that you're trying to build things with to kind of like get that inspiration to keep going?
Yeah, no, I think it's a combo, right?
Okay.
Like I'm completely fine with failure.
Okay.
Like
I
it's
like
just
that.
something that like people need to get used to, in other words. And then like, same thing. It's like if you didn't already like to do it, like don't even start the venture, right?
Mm,
Like
hmm.
because you need to have all of the outside fact, like basically internally, intrinsically, you're going to have to want to do it because it's not going to
Right.
work like if you're just doing it for money, at least right off the bat. All these passion
Right.
projects, like people are going to be able to see through that. People are going to like,
Hmm.
not, and then you're not going to be able to dig deep and work through kind of like at the most important moments, right?
Right.
So a lot of that is like I already love to travel. Like I'm fine with making content. It's very, outside my niche and I'm not used to it
Yes.
yet, but like, something that I'm trying to get more comfortable with. And then like same thing. I love video games, so I like have a bucket list item of wanting to make a video game at some point, and
Hmm.
met the right people to be able to do it. One of our friends that lives out in Thailand, my old creative
Okay.
director that I was talking about, like we have come together and we're talking about it, and it's like, all right, let's make a video game. Why not? So
Wow.
our animator is trying to learn how to like work within Unity and all those things.
Wow.
And then my buddy and I, the creative director, he's like my main business partner. We have written a few documentaries,
Hmm.
kind of like TV limited series ones.
Okay.
We've been having some conversations with like a few different companies. Like we have a selling agreement right now, so then we're going to hopefully
Okay.
take it to a few production companies soon, and then be able to move to Japan to try to work through the actual
Ah,
TV show production and things like that.
I love this all so much because it encompasses everything that you love. And I feel like you're fearless in the sense that, like, you just hop right into the things that you like. And I think that's inspiring because a lot of people, they keep those ideas in their head. Like, they could be like, oh, I mean, I was doing marketing and economics and I was in media. I don't know if I can do a video game or produce a documentary or, travel and be a content creator, even though you're doing well to have 30K on TikTok already. Like, that's
Hmm.
incredible. So, I think that's inspiring for a lot of people. What would you say is your like distance between thought and action? Like, how quickly do you mobilize?
No, that's a good question. It's still not like immediate, but
Okay.
usually it's like within like what I was saying, almost like within the serendipity of life. Like like
Right.
if I've had that idea for a while, I'm a huge fan of like notes on your phone as well. So like
Hmm.
writing down
Yes.
everything that you have in terms of like what you would always want to do, bucket list items, and then just like working through what those would be. And then obviously like when you meet the right person, it's like that's when you can kind of mobilize on the idea. Like
Love
Ethan
it.
and I, it's my business partner Ethan, like him and
Mhm.
I, have been thinking about making a video game for a while. We also worked on that video game together. And
Okay.
so we know all the back ends. We've made all the ads. We've seen it work well. And then we were talking. He has a friend that we met out in Japan. He lives in Thailand. He's an animator. And like basically, we talked to him when we were on our trip in November, and he was like, "Oh, that's awesome. I want to like have more passion in my work. I've always wanted to make a video game."
Wow.
And it was like, "All right, let's mobilize on this." So now we have a weekly meeting, and we've had one for like the last 3 months, just like of him trying to learn the software, us building out and storyboarding out a game and like all the aspects that we would need. And it's just like a slow grind. Like, it's not moving quickly, but it's like one of those that like,
Course.
if you have your weekly meeting, like I'm also a huge fan of those. Like if you're
Yes.
trying to do something with someone, like just throw it on the calendar. You could also get on the call and then talk for like 30 minutes and not have anything that actually happened. But if it's on the call, like you'll make progress and other
Right.
things like that. So it's a lot of that. The
Mm-hmm.
easier ones, like, I'll do endless research and things like that before we get to that point. But so
Right.
it's less mobilizing, but more like being prepared for the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, usually it's like like I said, like, working, trying to figure out how it could happen. And then you see something or meet someone that like has that perfect connection, talk to them, see if they're, interested or something like that. And
Mm-hmm.
then we can mobilize.
Basically, stay ready.
Yeah. Stay ready. Yeah.
I like
And if it's
that.
important to you, write it down, like, especially now that we're like 30 plus, right? Like, it's like,
Yeah.
this is the time, like,
It
when
is
else
the
is it going to be?
time.
Hmm.
Honestly, it's like no better time than now to really just start sooner because especially if you know
Yeah.
like failure could be a part of the process, you only
Yeah.
help yourself by starting sooner, especially if you know you already have the conviction to do it already. So
Yeah.
I like that.
Absolutely.
So how do you balance that though? Because it's not like you're in a small position. You have a large, like full-time position. Talk less of like, your, production, your video games, your venture, even though,
Hmm.
you have your own process and you still make time, I'm sure, for travel, friendships. So how do you balance all of that? And what's your approach to maybe prioritizing it?
Yeah, no, most definitely. Well, luckily right now, because of just like how things have developed, I'm working as the chief services officer, a little
Mm-hmm.
bit less than full time, kind of like
Okay.
20 to 30 hours. It
Okay.
should explode here soon, hopefully.
Okay.
But like right now, it's been a little more
Right.
easy to manage. So I've been able to
Mm-hmm.
have much more time for kind of like other things like that. I've
Okay.
been doing some consulting. I still work with like a few companies from Start Engine, helping them with
Okay.
their raises and things like that. And then like, some random like media agency clients and stuff that I do as well. And then
Okay.
I strategic advise for two companies right now. Two of my former employees reached out
Okay.
to me and they were just like, like we'd love to have you on board. So I have a bi-weekly meeting with them for like an
Okay.
hour where they just hit me with a bunch of bullet points. And I'm like, that's great. Maybe I'll connect you with this person. Like, don't do that. Stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I mean, like, and then all the passion projects. So like, I think the big thing is like, just making sure that you obviously have like things scheduled throughout the week. Right. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm a huge fan of like, your calendar just being filled up in
Yes.
certain ways, whether or not it's like
Mm-hmm.
personal stuff, whatever it is. Like it's annoying, like, maybe make it where it's blocked so people can't read it, but like,
Right.
just making sure that stuff is there because like, that's when we're going to have those conversations or that's when that work is going to get done. And then,
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of I kind of break things down into from to-dos to today's, like the things that I
Okay.
need to do
Yes.
versus the things I
Yeah.
need to do today.
Same.
And then just kind of like having, a to-do list that I consistently check off throughout the day that makes me feel good as I check them off.
It's like being a project manager for your own life.
Yeah, no, it is. It is.
I
And that's
love
what's funny.
it.
Sometimes I'm like, yeah, sometimes I tell my clients, I'm like, I'm working on this like client exclusively from like, this time to this time. And it's like, that client
Right.
is me. It's definitely not anyone else.
Yes, you sometimes you have to like make yourself your own client so you take yourself
Yeah.
seriously. I think if it's just
Hmm.
like you, I know it sounds weird because it's still like you're your own client, but I
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
to in my work I think about myself like that like okay, I'm my own client even for this
Hmm.
podcast because then I take it seriously. It doesn't become an option. Just like I would work for any of my
Yeah.
clients. So I love that you said that
Yeah.
because I didn't think
Yeah.
anybody
Give
else like
yourself the
thought like that.
respect. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Give yourself that respect.
I like that. So is there, and with all your success, because I think you're highly successful and you're just going up from here. Is there any piece of advice that you wish you could have received earlier on in your career, or do you think everything's kind of just like gone the way it's supposed to?
Um, I do think things have gone the way that they're supposed to.
Yeah.
But like I do wish I had some advice. Mainly I'd say like being more comfortable with ambiguity,
Okay.
like
Ooh,
you're
hate that so much.
yeah, it's tough. It's tough. Like when I'm trying to move to Japan to like film that documentary, like
Yes.
I need to give up my lease. I need to not have a place
Mm,
to stay here. I need to put stuff in
hmm.
storage. I don't know what I'm going to do, where I'm going to live,
Right.
other things like that. And that's a weird step to be taking at this age. But it's exciting and it's interesting.
Yes.
And I think that like, trying to be able to be okay with that, like you're not going to know what the path is, but like as long as you feel like you're on the path or like you're learning and you're growing as a person, like that's what's most important. A lot of the times it's much easier to like get so in the weeds and get so like dragged down that you're just really focusing on like, let me get this task done, let me get this done. It's like I wish that early on in my career, and that's what I tried to like instill in my employees when they work for me, was like, okay, how do I make this like into something that teaches me like how to move forward, that I could use on my resume, that like how could I like make this into my niche, or like make this into something that like I do really well that most people don't like to do. I was able to do that a few times along the way, uh, with like, basically creative strategy and stuff like that. But it took a little longer for me to get there than I wish.
I got
Yeah.
it. So I'm
Hmm.
curious now, and this is just like me just asking like random questions at
Yeah.
this point,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
like I'm curious, do you have, because you seem so organized, do you have like a general map of your life? Like I know a lot of things are serendipity where it's like, okay, preparation meets opportunity. But do you have like, okay, by 30, I want here, okay, by 40, and by 50, do you have like those type of benchmarks at all? Or do you kind of just let your life go the way it needs to go?
No, I don't have benchmarks like that.
Okay. Okay.
I feel like I might have when I was like, yeah, like 18 or 19, but like when they all start falling, it just doesn't matter.
Right.
I think that like, as long as, like I was saying, as long as you feel like you're on the grind and like you
Hmm.
are on the path, like, because like that's the most important thing to me. Usually like
Okay.
whether or not this is the right decision, or like you're wasting your time someplace, right?
Got
For
it.
lack of a better term. Um, and yeah, I think that just like, yeah, I mean, like that's the main portion and like how I feel about that part.
Got it. And then the last question before we wrap up is like, I know you've worked with a lot of investments and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Do you have
Hmm.
any advice to maybe those who are looking to now start? Because I know, like, we're in a space where people are realizing maybe they were kind of coasting through their life, but they're like, oh, I need to invest my finances, especially with the way things are trending and like inflation. What would
Hmm.
you like say to like a very beginner person looking to start investing?
Yeah. Um, Okay, so within the last 2 years, I
Mm-hmm.
took my Series 7. So
Mm-hmm.
technically, I'm like a registered representative. So this is not financial advice. I need to say
Okay.
that
Got it.
naturally.
Sure.
Yeah. And so mainly, I would say, all right, if you are like super, because most people that are like
Mhm.
early in that way are very concerned
Mhm.
about losing any money, right? So
Right.
really, I'd start with just like a high yield savings account. You can
Mhm.
get those within like Robinhood or something like that
Of
for
course.
over like 5%, which is actually pretty
Mhm.
insane right now. There was a
Mhm.
moment there, my friend that has like, he's very risk adverse. He has a
Yeah.
bunch of money in there and he pays for his entire rent like from just that.
Wow.
So really, like, obviously it's a lot in there, but
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
still, if you're super risk adverse, like that's the way to go. Number
Right.
one is that. Number two would be like any of the like S&P 500
Mhm.
indexes. Indexes are
Mhm.
already like, very diversified in their own right.
Right.
So something like VOO or,
Mhm.
Vanguard is
Yes.
like usually
A
usually
safe
the
one.
best.
Yeah.
Hmm. And just like, the way that I was able to do that and what I built up over time in terms of my
Mhm.
investing, really it's just like making it almost your own version of your 401k. So
Okay.
like putting in a
Yeah.
reoccurring investment, like when you get paid once every two
Mhm.
weeks at $250, like
Mhm.
you most likely aren't going to miss it like once it's started. So
Yes.
just like putting that in there, and then it's just like that also dollar averages in. So like, basically it's
Right.
much safer than like trying to time the market and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, those would be the first ones. From there,
Okay.
you can work into like individual investments and other things like that. Obviously, like then you have enough money to potentially work into like crypto and like equity crowdfunding
Right.
investing and kind of like those things.
I like
But
that.
first part's high yield savings account, and then an S&P
Right.
500 index.
I like that. Kind of start safe and then work your way up to the more riskier
Yeah.
investments. Obviously, maybe using like a percentage of each,
Yeah.
not
It
putting
should be a
all your
percentage
investments,
now.
but like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Love
It should be a
that.
percentage.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So, we've come to the end of the podcast, and I always ask everybody a couple of questions. So, the first
Go for
question
it.
is, what was a struggle bus moment for you?
A struggle bus moment for me. Yes, very natural one. So when I, very easy to think of one. When I left the gaming startup, I
Mhm.
was moving to a startup that was essentially, it's like rewards for Lyft and Uber. So like
Okay.
you take them and then like you'd get like, stars and then you'd get like $10 after so many
Hmm.
stars, whatever. I was moving to that company and uh, a week into me moving there, the pandemic started. So we
Wow.
went from like trying to have exponential growth to like let's just
Hmm.
survive, and it's also based on like hospitality and
Right.
travel. So within my
Everything that was shut down.
and I was the growth manager. So I like showed up, and then after a week of the pandemic starting and telling us to go home, I like turned to
Mm,
my friends and I was like, if I was them, I would fire me. And
yeah.
then a week later they did, obviously, naturally,
Mm, right.
laid off, not fired, whatever.
Yeah.
And then it was like 5 months or so of being unemployed, and
Hmm.
that was a new experience for me. So just like
Hmm.
trying to like do the same thing, make sure that like you still feel creative, make sure that you get something done in that day, all those
Hmm.
things that keep your mind right, that keep you kind of like moving forward.
Yeah.
And then kept applying, going through the wheel of rejection, and then eventually ended up
Mm,
working at Square, and then things just kind of exploded from there. So just like one of
yes.
those where it's like, make sure that you're going, like things are going to be okay, just like
Hmm.
keep that mind busy, like make sure like if you're not going to do anything, work out that day, kind of like simple things, just to make sure that you have like one or two things that you're doing well, reading,
Right.
making sure that you're like consistently like, how could I change this, or how could I move forward, and all those things.
Perfect. And I love that Square was the one right after like being laid
Hmm.
off in the pandemic, because I'm sure that was
Yep.
such like a boost to like your system. Like, yes, I'm back out here.
Yep. No, most definitely.
Love that. The next question is, what moment were you most proud of yourself as it relates to your profession?
Um, that's a good question too.
Hmm.
I would say, I mean, getting promoted to that VP position
Hmm. Hmm.
was really like a big high five to myself. I was very stoked on that one. Never thought at like 27 I'd be able to run two departments, have like 17 people under me, and like try to basically foster and develop all of those people's careers as well, and then feel that type of
Yeah.
trust, and then do really well. Like we raised the most
Yes.
money that we had raised in history that year, uh, and like
I'm
a bunch
literally
of
clapping
great.
for you.
Thank you, and like a bunch of great things, like all across the board. I felt like those, I loved the people that I worked with, like
Hmm.
underneath me, and like I could feel them growing and developing, and I could feel the trust and all those things. And it was just awesome to be like a good manager and like feel that way about people that, you're helping foster and develop and grow.
Congratulations, because that's no small feat. And especially at
Thank you.
27, like only going
Yeah.
up from here.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So the next question is, what is your definition of success?
Oh man, that's a tough one. Definition of success. So,
Yes.
I mean, it's different per every project, and I'm sure it's different per
Right.
every person.
Hmm.
But mainly, mine is focused around like whether or not I felt like I put in my best effort, I got the results that I wanted, and really like if I feel like I grew from the situation, or if I
Hmm.
felt like that was like like someone taking my time from me, for lack of a better
Right.
term.
Yeah.
Uh, so really, it's just like, did I grow? Do I feel like I did well? Like also like you're talking about, like making sure that you give yourself your flowers, like when
Yeah.
you do well, like don't forget that what we've achieved this year is amazing. Like what we've
Yes.
done is great. Like you deserve that. You put your stamp on it and things like that. So really
Mm-hmm.
it's like, yeah, do I feel like I could put my stamp on that of like, you tried your hardest, things went well, and like you're better because of it.
I like that. And has that always been your approach to defining success for you?
No, I think I've kind of like backed into that. I think I've grown into
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
I definitely think before it was like, more of a like, can I put this on something, or like, like, does this like essentially like, yeah, is this like very obvious that like we
Right.
succeeded here? Versus like, yeah, like what did I take from it? Right. There's a
Mm,
difference between the like how the company developed, how things went, like whether or not people were happy about that. Cause a lot of managers also don't give you like your flowers. Like they're not
it's
like, that was
true.
amazing. Or they do it
Yeah.
for 15 seconds and then they're like,
Moving
here's
on.
another boat of stuff that you have to do. But yeah, it was just more like, how do I feel about this situation? How did I grow from it? Versus like, was it the best for the company? And even though I stayed up to 2 a.m., all those things.
Love that. And the final question is, what piece of advice would you give to somebody who's looking to advance in their career professionally?
Um, so it depends on obviously like what stage you're in, of
Right.
course, but always, I also think that like a lot of it is also who you know, right? Like what we've
Right.
been talking about. So trying to
Hmm.
make sure that you look at your network or like look at people that in terms of like, kind of like truncating them into different portions. Like
Hmm.
it's like if you know someone that has built like a great marketing agency, it's
Hmm.
like, okay, could I even just give them work and help them out in a certain way? So then,
Hmm.
like, I don't necessarily need to be involved. I don't necessarily need to be paid, but like, I like to see the people that I know grow and succeed. And on top of
Yeah.
that, in the future, there's probably going to be a time when they're like, oh, he gave me this like contract back in the day. Like, he's great, or other things like that. So, really,
Hmm.
it's like making sure that you're consistently talking to your network like in those ways, like having conversations. You can also like even go and have coffee. Most people that are like really successful are really happy to give back.
It's
That's something that
true.
my dad has always talked about, and he'll have like
Yeah.
interviews with people that are going to like his college, like, which is just
Yes.
ridiculous but like super nice to do. And like most people like within their higher education, within like their work and things like that, just tend to be like very giving. So,
Yes.
taking advantage of that, talking to people, not necessarily like everything doesn't have to have like an outcome that you're looking for. Everything
It's
doesn't have
true.
to have a dollar sign. Like just make sure that you're talking to everyone, connecting people, and then eventually you'll be one of those people that'll be hooked up in the same way.
Love it so much, Parker. This is such an amazing conversation. I feel like you have
Thank
so
you.
much wisdom already at like such like still like we're still young. So it's still a young age. And I think that a lot of people will get a lot from this. And thank you for even taking some of your time to be
Of
on this
course.
show with how busy you are. So I appreciate it.
Of course. No, thank you so much for having me. Really excited to see what you do in your career too. You've crushed
Thank
it since
you.
we first met. So it's very inspiring as well.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, lovely to be here.
Awesome. Thank you. That was such an amazing conversation. Parker dropped so many gems. Until next time, besties.